You need a good pencil case. That always gets you in with the children. My name is Francesca Thompson and I am a primary school teacher. So I did a Bachelor of Arts degree and my dissertation title led me down the route of kind of children and the psychology behind the criminal behaviours that they see. And actually I've kind of discovered from the content of my dissertation that school was a really important part in the socialisation of children and the support and the emotional well-being, as well as the kind of teaching element, and decided that that's where I wanted to go rather than kind of support through the police. I did a Bachelor of Arts degree in criminology and then I stayed on for another year at a different university. I did a PGCE for 1 year in primary teaching. So you need GCSEs, A to C is what I needed, and then a degree of some sort to do a PGCE. But there's so many people that do a Bachelor of Arts in education, whether that's primary or secondary. But also there's the SKIT training programme, which allows people to learn on the job. So instead of doing the university and then going out into placement and coming back, it's people who might have experience in the workplace and they are based in a school, they're sponsored and mentored by the school, but they're affiliated with a further education centre. But in order to get onto the Bachelor of Arts courses, the PGCEs and everything like that, you need to do a skills test as well in maths and English. I started in university for a couple of weeks, kind of learning about the pedagogy and the theories behind teaching. And then you move into a placement, then you come back to university, talk about how that went, what it involved, where you want to take your next placement. And then we were all sent out into different schools, different types of schools, different demographics, kind of around the social area, to experience almost the polar opposite of what we've had in our first placement, to see how we felt about those different teaching environments, different teaching methods, different kind of skills that were involved in different school environments. And then came back to uni together at the end to kind of look at job opportunities and ways we could use both of our experiences to go out into the world of teaching. I was invited to interview for my first job after my first placement, which was during the second placement period. And actually I really found that while I thought I'd enjoy my second placement more, I couldn't wait to be back at where I'd had my first placement. So I knew that school environment, that way of teaching, the philosophy that that school had was definitely for me. But I'm really pleased I went to that second placement and experienced what I didn't enjoy, but learnt some really valuable lessons and some really valuable teaching points. When you complete your PGCE year, you get qualified teacher status. If you do a Bachelor of Arts, you can do a Bachelor of Arts in education with qualified teacher status, or you can get that qualified teacher status on the job. It's just kind of that seal, kind of professional seal that shows that you're committed to continue professional development and educating yourself while being on the job. So when you qualify, you get your qualified teacher status, you graduate, and then you go into a 1 year of probation as a newly qualified teacher. Throughout that year, you get more mentor support, more time out of class than you do after that time. You get time to observe and talk to colleagues, spend time with children that maybe aren't in your year group while you're working. And then after that year of newly qualified teacherness, you you pass. That's that year gone, and you've kind of flown the nest. You get a bit more freedom, a bit more opportunity then to put your own stamp on the class, rather than when you're doing your newly qualified teacher role, it's very much supported and guided by your school, which is really helpful actually. But then when you've done that year, you get to kind of go your own way, which is good. Once you've finished your NQT year, the world is your oyster. There are so many people who choose to stay at class teacher level, which is great, because staying with the children and being totally committed to the classroom is a fantastic way to take that career path. But there is plenty of room for manoeuvre in the school environment. Generally, once you've finished your NQT year, you might take on a subject leader responsibility of the foundation subjects, kind of music, drama, geography, history, that kind of thing. And the next step up is then to be a core subject leader, your maths, English and science. And that kind of comes with a middle leader responsibility, kind of meeting with the senior leadership team and guiding the curriculum and development throughout the school. And then the next step is senior leadership, which is kind of your deputy heads, assistant heads, and then eventually head teachers and that kind of thing. But throughout all of those, you're mentored through them. You can do a qualification for middle leadership, a qualification for senior leadership, being a governor, meeting with the PTA. So it's really good opportunity wherever you are in school to get involved in the wider school, kind of helping with clubs and helping with events and things like that. When I first got my job, I was employed into year 1, and then throughout the summer holidays got a phone call saying, actually, we need you to go into year 4. And so that was strange for me, because I wanted to be in with the infants, but actually I got started in year 4, loved it. It's a nice year where there's kind of a lull for assessment and kind of intense learning. It's more creative. But now I'm the year 6 teacher, which comes with a lot more responsibility. But also I've taken on the leadership of English throughout our school. Our school has a special needs unit, so leading the English for mainstream children and for children with special needs, and making sure there's progression and it's accessible for everyone. That's kind of been a big thing for me. I also oversee some of the curriculum leadership within our school, looking at assessment and data throughout early years, Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2. So, and that's been quite quick, actually. It's 5 years. So I look forward to what the next 5 years will bring. So as a teacher, I'm supported by our local authorities, consultants. Different schools have different bodies that they kind of report to. Academies have different bodies that they might report to. It might be internal. But at the end of the day, we all report to the government. We all report to our local authorities' standards, and we're all measured by national kind of qualification, national attainment. Being a teacher is considered being a professional, and part of being a professional is that you're committed to CPD, continued professional development. So we're constantly on courses, we're constantly getting updates, reading kind of studies and paperwork that keeps us informed. But there's a lot of initiative behind that. If you're taking the lead on a subject, then you need to be up to date with what's going on. But there's so much training offered throughout the course of your career. You can't really get away from learning new things. And I think the beauty of teaching is that you never stop learning year on year, whether that's in your classroom or going to networking meetings and things like that. You never stop being trained. Time management is a huge thing. There's so many things in the news about work-life balance. Every year we complete a work-life balance questionnaire, which is really good. I really like that our school particular invests that time and that thought into the support of its staff. Patience is definitely a big one. People skills, because there are lots of children in education that need extra support. There's often more than one adult in the classroom, and so being able to communicate with the adults that you're working with, leading that team, then as you get further up the ladder, communicating to those who might be above you and those who you might need to nurture is really helpful. Communicating with parents, flexibility, there's so many different qualities. But I think enthusiasm is the biggest one, because you're leading from the front. And if you're not enthusiastic, how can you expect a class of young children, young people to be enthusiastic too? So when you're at university, you do take part in some lessons as if you're the children and there are professionals teaching you those different subject areas. But you leave with a copy of the national curriculum. This is what the children need to learn. How are you going to do it? And it's about investing that time in the children, particularly at the beginning of the year, knowing what they like, knowing what they don't like, communicating with the year before and seeing what really worked for them, and then building your lessons year on year. If you're lucky enough to stay in the year group for a few years, then you can kind of tweak and change different things, but you need to be flexible and change almost the whole thing just to suit the cohort that you might have. So while it is about being confident and knowing yourself, it's about being humble enough to think this isn't really going to work. I'm going to need to spend some time here working on this bit, and then the rest just comes. Children learn in so many different ways. When I was working lower down the school, we had a child who just loved the farm, loved horses, wouldn't count unless we were counting horses, that kind of thing. It's just about making it relevant. We have had children who really enjoy dinosaurs, so when we're looking maybe at English writing a letter, you might be writing to a dinosaur or about a dinosaur. A typical day at my school, come in the morning, get all the whiteboard slides up. I like to leave the night before knowing that I can just walk in and it's all ready. But yeah, turn that whiteboard on, get everything ready, make sure everyone knows what's for lunch that day. Then children come in an hour or so after, take the register, first lesson, assembly, break duty, grab a quick cup of tea if you can. Then we come back for our second lesson. That might involve small group work, kind of more practical, different bits and pieces. Then it's lunchtime. That again involves lunch duty, maybe some clubs, homework club, buddy club, different things on the playground. Then afternoon lessons, a quick brain break, and then the rest of the day. Then when the children go home, that's when marking begins, maybe clubs after school, preparing for the next day to make sure everything's set in its place and ready to go for the next day. There's always some laminating to be done at home or something to cut out, but I really try and leave things at school as much as I can. 6 o'clock is when school shuts, so that's when the lights go off. It's when children learn something for the first time that they didn't know before. It's just amazing. Whether it's something they might have been struggling to find out for themselves for a while, and there's that moment of realisation. And when you've been part of that journey, that's really, really just wonderful. I love that. You see the fruits of your labour, and I mean, it's 10 times their labour, but you see the impact that you've been able to have in supporting a child in understanding the world around them, and helping them reach those goals. I mean, I know every job is hard. I'm under no illusions that teaching is a hard job, and there are so many jobs that people would say are harder, but it's not just you. At the end of the day, if you're not feeling very well, then children are going to know that. Children are going to pick up on that. If you're not interested, children are going to probably not invest themselves in things. And if you wake up feeling grotty in the morning, you've got 30 people who are depending on you. You can't just come and go as you please. You need to be really committed to that job, because you are often the only stable in those young people's lives. I find it so challenging that you don't get to see the end of the education journey. Yes, we get to see their primary journey finish, but actually that goes on so much further, and it's great when children come back and say, oh, I've done this, I'm part of the rugby team, or I've received this award. But then kind of a couple of years down the line, that's when you become old news, and it's just wonderful when you hear of children that you've spent so much time with and really invested in them, when you see how far they've come. Obviously children, that's the main kind of population I communicate with throughout the day. We have office staff that we spend a lot of time communicating with, parents, other teachers, senior leaders, the governors of the school, kind of siblings sometimes that come and pick up, feeder schools, outside agencies that might come and support children with special needs, my team as well, and interacting with the team maybe in the year before, supporting kind of where the children have come from, what worked for them, what really didn't work for them, and how we're going to make that accessible in our class for all children. And we have a speech therapist at school, we have a school counsellor, again we're in regular contact with them. I would say be firm in what you decide to do. There are so many different routes, there are so many different qualifications, but you need to be committed to what you want to do and what you want out of this, and that might change, but whatever you do in this job, you need to do it wholeheartedly and cheerfully as well. I was really surprised with how quickly I fell in love with teaching. That wasn't my plan, it wasn't where I was going. My degree was in criminology, but actually through just being on the job and being beside children all the time, that's what surprised me, how I thought I was going to be changing their world, and actually quite often they change my world, mostly for the good, but actually sometimes there are things you take home and you do feel sad, and there are times when it's going to hurt that maybe you couldn't make the difference you thought you could or that you wanted to. But there are so many times that you go home with a really full heart that you've made a difference, and that child can now count to 10 because you got all the horses out and made the effort to make it applicable to what they love. That surprised me a lot.